Hello, my name is John von Neumann, and I'm here to do a Draw My Life. Everything began when I was born on December 28, 1903 in Budapest, Hungary, to Mixa Neumann and Margit Kahn. They named me Jonas Neumann, but adopted von to my surname as an adult. That's a story for later. I was born Jewish and grew up in quite an affluent family. My father was a banker, and my mother's family ran a business selling farm equipment. My parents had 3 kids, and I'm the eldest of the 3. When we had guests over, my parents would ask me to recite things as a way to entertain them. I was very good at it. Anyways, when I was young, probably around primary school age, I had a teacher. His name was Laszlo Raz, who recommended my father to get me a private tutor in mathematics. Yeah, apparently I was pretty good at it. I started working with Professor Kirkshak and Mr. Michael Facchetti, and eventually published my first paper with Professor Facchetti on extremal polynomials when I was around 18 in 1922. Backtracking a bit, I went to secondary school at Lutheran Gymnasium. Everything was great, but then World War I happened. I wasn't affected too much by it, but after the war ended, Bela Kun occupied Hungary for several months with his communist regime. My family and I fled Hungary for about a month before coming back to face issues within Budapest. When it came to university studies, I wanted to do math, but my father wanted me to get a job and do chemistry. We argued a lot about this, so as a compromise, I studied chemical engineering at Swiss Federal Institute in Zurich and managed to get a PhD in mathematics at University of Budapest, despite not going to classes. I actually spent most of my time in Zurich studying chemistry, although I wasn't really doing chemistry. I was doing math. Sorry, Dad. I did a postdoctorate under David Hilbert, who was a pretty cool and smart dude. And then I took positions at various universities like University of Berlin and Hamburg, working on math and physics problems, and published my paper on bluffing. It was inspired by the game of poker and is later seen as a key point in the field of game theory. In 1930, I went to Princeton as a visiting lecturer. Apparently, the students thought I was a mediocre teacher, but at least the lectures were interesting enough that Princeton later hired me. I also got into a lot of car accidents that they named the intersection after me, so I left my legacy there. The same year I went to Princeton, I married Mariette Kovesi and had 1 child with her, Marina, but then I got my heart broken when she fell in love with someone else. I reconnected with my childhood sweetheart, Clara Dan, and I'm still married to her. Clara was also a computer programmer, and we shared many interests. When World War II happened, I was invited to work on the infamous Manhattan Project by J. Robert Oppenheimer himself. I worked on the implosion design for the atomic bombs. In fact, the one that was dropped on Nagasaki, the Fat Man, used my design. During this time, I also published Theory of Games and Economic Behavior with my dear colleague at Princeton, Oscar Morgenstern, which could be applied to many fields from evolutionary biology to national defense. Post-war, I worked closely with the US military, modifying the ENIAC computer to a stored program machine, which means that the program instructions are stored in electronic memory. This work inspired me to go on and develop an even better machine at the Institute for Advanced Study. This design came to know as the von Neumann architecture by the others. I am truly flattered. Let me tell you more about the architecture, as it is one of my greatest achievements so far. It is called the ADVAC, which stands for Electronic Discrete Variable Automatic Computer. The ADVAC consists of a processing unit, a control unit, a memory, an external mass storage, and mechanisms for output and input. I define ADVAC as a very high-speed automatic digital computing system, a device that can carry out instructions to perform calculations of a considerable order of complexity. It has a specific unit just for operations, which I named Arithmetic Logic Unit, or ALU. ALU computes basic operations such as addition and subtraction using binary numbers, instead of a decimal system like the computers before did. Oh, decimal system is more known as base 10 calculations to most people, by the way. Although binary numbers do simple addition and subtraction for essentially all calculations and takes much more steps. But using the decimal system means I would need a multiplication table that requires complicated equipment. Another important highlight of this machine is the logic control of the device that makes sure all operations are carried out regardless of what they are. To acquire this ability, the device must have big memory to store all the intermediate results along the way, especially with the number of steps that a binary number system requires. A computer is essentially like a human brain. It is controlled by neurons and has synaptic delays. The neurons also have two states, excitatory and inhibitory response. This corresponds to my philosophy on artificial intelligence. Later in my life, I spent most of my time contemplating one question: whether or not a self-reproducing computer is possible. In order to create one, I would need to make a machine that can process its own genetics and read it first as instructions and second as data. At first, I wanted to be a kinematic automaton system. Trying to do so had a ton of complexity and be rather slow. My colleague Stanislaw Ulam gave me the idea to use a cell-based system. Information will be interpreted by the self-reproducing machine and used to build a copy of the machine. The information will then be copied and given to the new machine. In fact, what I'm describing here is much of how DNA functions, though my idea predates the discovery of DNA's double helix. In cells, DNA codes for what the cell is to do when dividing, and then the DNA is replicated and given to a new cell. Using this idea, I have proved theoretically that it is possible that a particular pattern could make infinite copies of itself by designing a 200,000 cell configuration that could do so. In 1955, I was diagnosed with bone cancer. I was working on the cellular automata at the time, but I did not get to finish it. I have prepared some lectures to be given at Yale University, but I don't think I will be able to finish.
Unfortunately, John von Neumann met his demise on February 8, 1957, succumbing to his bone cancer. His paper and knowledge on the theory of self-reproducing automata was completed and published posthumously by Arthur Walter Burks in 1966. His ideas and concepts are still used to this day, and his idea of cellular automata was developed into the von Neumann universal constructor.